The air in the grand chamber of the Korathi primacy was thick with the scent of ionized ozone and despair. Ambassador Xyler stood before the High Council, his ceremonial robes, usually a vibrant tapestry of spun crystal and living fiber, seeming dull and lifeless in the dim, crimson light of their threatened world. Outside the armored observation dome, the skies of Kora Prime were scarred by the orbital flashes of a war they were unequivocally losing. Each silent detonation was another ship, another 1,000 lives, another nail in the coffin of their 6,000-year-old civilization. The Zephyrian Empire was a relentless machine. Their fleets moved with a cold, mathematical precision, their strategies flawless, their resources seemingly infinite. They did not hate the Korathi, they simply saw them as an obstacle, an asset to be stripped and absorbed. Korathi warfare, for all its technological prowess, was a thing of tradition and honor. They met fleet to fleet in glorious, predictable engagements. They challenged champions. They respected the sanctity of non-military targets. The Zephyrians exploited this, treating the war not as a clash of cultures, but as a hostile takeover. They targeted supply lines, blockaded agricultural worlds, and systematically dismantled the Korathi war machine with an efficiency that was both terrifying and insulting. High Commander Vorlag's Third Fleet was shattered at the Cygnus relay, Xyler reported, his voice, usually a resonant baritone, now a strained rasp. They did not engage him directly. They collapsed the relay node, stranding his fleet deep in uncharted space with no fuel source. They will starve. A murmur of anguish rippled through the assembled counselors, their multifaceted eyes dimming in collective grief. Elder Thune, his carapace weathered by 3 centuries of service, slammed a crystalline fist on the council table. "This is not war, it is pest control. They treat us like insects to be exterminated with cold logic." "And it is working," Xyler countered, the brutal truth hanging in the air. "Our traditions, our honor, they are liabilities the Zephyrians have learned to exploit perfectly. We have exhausted all conventional strategies. We have appealed to the Galactic Council, who offer only sanctions and sternly worded resolutions while the Zephyrians laugh behind their shields. We have one option left, a desperate one, a distasteful one." He activated the central holoprojector. A sphere of brilliant blue and white swam into existence, mottled with green and tan. It was a world teeming with a chaotic, unrestrained vibrancy that was almost vulgar to Korathi sensibilities. "Sector 618, Xyler announced. "A single-star, single-sapient species system. The species calls itself humanity. The world is Earth." Counselor Vela, head of the diplomatic corps, shimmered with skepticism. "A pre-FTL society, what help could they possibly offer? Do you mean to arm primitives with sticks and stones?" "They are not pre-FTL," Xyler corrected, zooming the projection in. Orbital rings, bustling spaceports, and the faint energy signatures of a system-wide defense grid became visible. They achieved interstellar travel only 73 standard cycles ago. They have colonized their 4th and 5th planets and have outposts in their asteroid belt. They are newcomers, galactic infants. They are even less useful. Vorlag's voice boomed from a comms unit, patched in from his beleaguered command cruiser. "Infants cannot fight a war against an empire that has stood for 10 millennia. Is where our intelligence becomes complicated," Xyler said, his own apprehension palpable. He pulled up another file. It was a chaotic montage of images and data streams, painstakingly gathered by deep space probes. It showed grainy footage of human history. Crude, brutal conflicts fought with sharpened steel, then black powder, then fission and fusion. It was a history written in blood, a relentless, unbroken chain of conflict. Other species had wars, periods of violent disagreement. Humanity, it seemed, had warfare as a state of being, a constant process of refinement. The galactic archives classify them as a level 7 aggressor species, Xyler explained. A classification usually reserved for non-sapient predators. It was considered a data error at the time. We believe it is not. He brought up a final data point, a summary of their more recent history. In the 73 cycles since they reached for the stars, they have not fought one another. Not once. Their entire species is unified under a single governing body, their military forces combined into one entity. They have spent 7 decades in absolute peace, focusing on science, exploration, and expansion. snorted. Peace. After a history like that, it seems unlikely. We believe it is not peace, Xyler said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It is a ceasefire. A species that has honed warfare to such a terrifying degree for millennia does not simply forget it. They have spent their entire existence fighting their most dangerous enemy, themselves. Now unified, they have no one left to fight. They are a perfectly coiled spring, a predator that has run out of prey in its own small forest and is now looking at the larger jungle. The council was silent, the implication hanging over them. My proposal, Xyler continued, is to give them prey. We approach them, offer them full partnership. We give them our FTL technology, our shield generators, our energy sciences, everything. In return, they fight for us. For us, it is a chance at survival. For them, it is a chance to unleash their nature on a galaxy that has never seen its like, against an enemy that has earned their full measure of fury. The chamber erupted. You would unleash monsters to fight monsters, Vela cried. Zephyrians are methodical conquerors, Xyler shot back. These humans, they may be something else entirely, something worse, but the Zephyrian way leads to our certain subjugation. The human way offers a chance, however slim, of victory. I ask the Council for permission to make contact, to go to this Earth and plead our case. It is our last and most terrible hope. Days later, the Korathi diplomatic vessel, the Starlight Petitioner, translated from the unreal geometries of FTL space into the calm of the Sol system. It was met not by a welcoming party, but by a cordon of slate-gray warships that bristled with a startling density of weapons emplacements. They were blocky, unaesthetic, and brutally functional. There were no elegant solar sails or glowing energy nacelles. They were flying guns, pure and simple. A crisp, unadorned voice cut through their comms. Unidentified vessel, you have entered United Defense Council restricted space. State your identity and purpose. You have 1 minute before we initiate defensive protocols. Xyler, standing on the bridge of his ship, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the life support. The Zephyrians, for all their aggression, always opened with flowery, condescending diplomatic language. This was the interstellar equivalent of a gun being cocked. "This is Ambassador Xyler of the Korathi Primacy," he responded, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come in peace on a matter of galactic importance." Was a pause, filled with the crackle of scanning beams washing over his ship. "Your vessel's configuration is unknown to us. Your energy signatures are novel. Hold your position. A reception team will be dispatched." Reception team was a single human who boarded their ship via a sterile docking tube. She was not a diplomat. She wore a severe, dark gray military uniform, her face stark and unadorned, her gray eyes missing no detail. She introduced herself only as General Eva Rostova of the United Defense Council. She walked onto their bridge, her boots making a stark, solid sound on the crystalline deck. Her gaze swept over the Korathi crew, who shifted uncomfortably. To them she seemed unfinished, soft-skinned with a predatory stillness. "Ambassador Xyler," Rostova said, her tone flat and devoid of ceremony. "You are a long way from home. The Galactic Council Charter prohibits established species from making unsolicited contact with newly emergent ones. You are in violation of that charter. Charter also presumes we have the luxury of time to follow its protocols." "General," Xyler replied, "my people are facing extinction." He explained their predicament, his words measured and shorn of the usual Korathi embellishments. He spoke of the Zephyrian Empire, of their systematic conquest, of the Koratha's impending doom. He did not beg. He presented it as a strategic problem, hoping to appeal to the cold logic he sensed in this human. Rostova listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Extinction," she finally said, the word tasting strange in her mouth. "A powerful motivator. We offer a full technological exchange," Xyler pressed. "Your ships are impressive for a young species, but they lack gravitic drives and energy shielding. Our weapons are light years ahead of your projectile and missile-based systems. We can give you a shortcut of 500 cycles of development. We will give you access to the galactic community. We will give you everything. All we ask is that you help us fight." "Are asking us to bleed for a people we have never met in a war we have no stake in," Rostova stated. I am offering your species a galaxy, Xyler countered, and an enemy worthy of your history. That last phrase seemed to land. A flicker of something interest, understanding, something ancient and cold, passed through Rostova's eyes. You have studied us, she said. It wasn't a question. We have, Xyler admitted. We know what you are. Rostova's lips curved into a faint, unsettling smile. You think you do, you see a history of conflict and assume we are eager for more. You mistake our past for our ambition. What is your ambition, General? To ensure our future, unconditionally, absolutely. She paced the bridge, her gaze falling on the star chart that showed the encroaching Zephyrian fleets. Your technology is tempting. A galaxy of open doors is also tempting. But the cost, my people have finally achieved peace. You are asking me to plunge them back into war, into a conflict of a scale we have never before seen. Scale your people seem uniquely evolved to handle, Xyler dared to say. Rostova stopped and looked at him, her gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. You are desperate, Ambassador. Desperation makes one willing to open doors without knowing what might come through them. I will take your proposal to the Council, but I advise you to pray that we decline. You are asking for a protector, but you may get a contagion. The United Defense Council debated for 3 days. To the Korathi, waiting in orbit, it was an agony of suspense. To the humans, it was a cold, brutal calculus of risk versus reward. On the 4th day, General Rostova returned to the Starlight petitioner. We accept, she said, her voice devoid of triumph. The Terran Expeditionary Force will be placed under your strategic command, but with tactical autonomy. We will provide 3 fleet battle groups, supported by a core of our Special Operations Division. The technology transfer will begin immediately. We have downloaded your star charts and tactical data. Xyler felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. Thank you, General. You have saved my people. Looked at him, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of something that might have been pity in her eyes. Do not thank me yet, Ambassador. You have just hired the architects of ruin. Let us hope, for both our sakes, that you can afford the price of our construction. The arrival of the Terran Expeditionary Force at the Korathi staging ground in the Orion Nebula was a study in contrasts. Korathi ships were things of beauty, elegant, sweeping craft that pulsed with soft light and moved with the grace of aquatic predators. The human ships that warped into existence beside them were ugly, asymmetrical blocks of metal, scarred with heat-shielding tiles and bristling with kinetic cannons, missile pods, and strange, unidentifiable antennae. They did not glide. They tore through space, propelled by raw, violent power. High Commander Vorlag watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Honor's Blade, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. They look like repurposed asteroids, he commented to Xyler, who stood beside him. Their aesthetic sensibilities are underdeveloped, Xyler allowed. But General Rostova assures me of their effectiveness. The human commander of the force, a man named Colonel Marcus Thorne, came aboard the Honor's Blade. He was lean and weathered, his face a mask of disciplined professionalism. He moved with an economy of motion that Vorlag found unsettling. There was no ceremony, no posturing. He and his team of data analysts set up their terminals on Vorlag's pristine bridge and immediately began integrating their systems. High Commander, Thorne began, his voice a low gravel. We've analyzed the last 10 cycles of engagement data with the Zephyrians. Your strategy is honorable. Vorlag straightened, taking it as a compliment. We meet them with courage and strength, and you're losing, Thorne stated bluntly. You fight force on force. You allow them to dictate the terms of every battle. Your fleets are predictable. Your supply lines are vulnerable. You are fighting a war of materiel, and they have more materiel. We are not going to fight that war anymore. He brought up a star chart, overlaying it with dozens of complex data streams. The Zephyrians have 3 main fleet corridors. They are protected, heavily patrolled. A direct assault is suicide. You've tried that. We, however, are not going to use the corridors. He highlighted a region of space the Korathi called the Graveyard, a chaotic nebula filled with rogue black holes, radiation storms, and gravitic shears. No ship had ever navigated it. We're going through here, Thorne said. Vorlag was aghast. That is impossible. It would tear your ships apart. Our ships are built for durability, not beauty, Commander, Thorne replied. And our navigation computers are running predictive models based on real-time sensor feeds from 1,000 different probes we've already sent into the nebula. We will lose some, yes. We have factored in a 20% attrition rate, but the ships that make it through will emerge here. He pointed to a spot deep inside Zephyrian territory, at their primary fuel refinery and logistics hub at Xylos. We will not engage their fleet. We will cripple their ability to move their fleet. The plan was insane. It was cowardly. It flew in the face of every Korathi military doctrine. But as Vorlag looked at the cold certainty in Thorn's eyes, he also saw the brutal logic of it. The operation was a horrifying success. 22 human ships entered the graveyard. 18 emerged, battered and scarred but functional. They descended upon the Xylos system, which was protected by only a skeleton defense force. They did not bother with a glorious space battle. Human stealth craft deployed electronic warfare pods that spoofed Zephyrian sensors, making them believe their own relief fleet had arrived. While the planetary defenses were looking the other way, human marines in drop pods, moving with a speed and ferocity the Korathi had never witnessed, seized the central command nodes of the refinery. They didn't destroy it. They uploaded a virus, a logic bomb of human design, into the refinery's core systems. Then they left. 3 days later, as the main Zephyrian fleet arrived to secure the system, the logic bomb activated. It didn't cause an explosion. It subtly altered the refining process, introducing a microscopic, corrosive element into the entire fuel supply. Within a week, over half the Zephyrian fleet experienced catastrophic engine failures mid-flight, their ships becoming helpless, drifting coffins. The Zephyrians, methodical and logical, were paralyzed. Their own fuel was now their greatest enemy. They had to ground their entire war machine to diagnose a problem they couldn't even find. The war ground to a halt. The Korathi celebrated. Vorlag, though deeply unsettled by the dishonorable tactics, could not deny the results. He had been given a reprieve, a chance to rebuild and rearm, but the humans were not rebuilding. They were escalating. The enemy is static, Thorn explained in the next strategy meeting, his voice cold as the void. This is the moment of maximum opportunity. They believe we will now strike at their fleets. They are wrong. We are going to strike at their morale. This was the beginning of Phase 2 of the human campaign. They called it Operation Banshee. Human ships, retrofitted with the Korathi stealth technology and their own advanced electronic warfare suites, began to haunt the edges of Zephyrian space. They never engaged directly. They would appear for a moment on a colony's sensors, broadcast a single, terrifying sound, a composite of human war cries, screams, and distorted alien distress calls, and then vanish. They would flicker into existence in the middle of a Zephyrian convoy, not firing a shot, but simply showing their presence before disappearing, leaving the Zephyrian crews terrified and paranoid. They targeted communications. They didn't just jam them, they hijacked them. A Zephyrian commander would call for reinforcements and would hear a human voice whispering back, "No one is coming." They sliced into civilian broadcasts, inserting subliminal images of death and ruin. To the Korathi, this was madness. It was terrorism. War was a matter for warriors, not for civilians. "You are trying to scare them to death," Vorlag demanded of Thorn. "Fear is a weapon, Commander," Thorn replied, his eyes dark. "A weapon more effective than any plasma cannon. We are not just fighting their ships. We are fighting their minds. We will break their will to fight, and their empire will crumble from within." The Zephyrians, a species that valued logic and order above all else, began to fray. Their rigid command structure buckled under the weight of paranoia. Commanders refused to move their fleets, fearing phantom attacks or sabotaged fuel. Colonies rioted, terrified of the unseen ghosts that haunted their skies. The Empire, once a monolithic entity, was showing cracks. It was then that the Zephyrians, in a desperate move, decided to make an example. They gathered a massive fleet and descended upon the neutral garden world of Silene, a planet known for its peaceful, non-aligned artist colonies. Their message was clear. If the Korathi and their new allies continued these tactics, neutral worlds would pay the price. They glassed half a continent from orbit, a barbaric act that shocked the galaxy. The Korathi were horrified. Xyler sent a message to Rostova, begging for restraint. "This is what your tactics have wrought, the death of innocents." Rostova's reply was swift and chilling. "They have proven they are willing to destroy a world to make a point. They have handed us the moral authority to respond in kind. Colonel Thorne has been authorized to proceed with Operation Scorched Earth." Vorlag had thought he understood brutality. He was wrong. The target was the Zephyrian agricultural world of Veridia II, a planet responsible for feeding a dozen of their core systems. A Korathi plan would have involved a blockade, a slow strangulation. Thorne's plan was something else entirely. The human fleet did not engage the system's defenders. They sent a single, heavily shielded ship on a kamikaze run toward Veridia's sun. Moments before it was destroyed, it deployed its payload, a swarm of self-replicating nanomachines designed for a single purpose. They were solar-powered, and they consumed silicon. The nanites formed a cloud around the star, a shimmering gray haze that began to dim its light. But their true purpose was more insidious. They rode the solar winds down to the planet below. They landed in the rich, fertile soil of Veridia II and began to consume it, breaking it down into inert dust. Within 2 weeks, every field, every forest, every blade of grass on the planet had turned to gray ash. The world was not just barren. Its very lithosphere had been rendered sterile for the next 10,000 years. It was a planetary murder. Vorlag watched the data feeds on his bridge, his entire body trembling. The crew around him was silent, their multifaceted eyes wide with a horror that transcended warfare. They had just witnessed a level of utter, absolute destruction they had not believed possible. This wasn't war. This was a violation of cosmic law. "Thorne," Vorlag whispered into the comms, his voice shaking. "What have you done?" The colonel's voice came back, devoid of any emotion. "We have denied the enemy a resource, permanently. They will starve. The war will be over sooner. Fewer will die in the long run." "Killed a world," Vorlag roared. "Worlds are tactical assets, Commander," Thorne replied. "And that asset is now off the board. We are preparing for the final offensive. The target is Zephyr Prime." Zephyrian Empire, broken, starving, and terrified, recalled all its remaining forces to its capital system. It was their last stand. The galaxy watched, expecting a climactic battle, a final, bloody confrontation between 3 great powers. They had no idea what was coming. General Rostova herself arrived in the system aboard the UDC flagship, the unquestionable verdict. It was a vessel larger and more menacing than any ship the Korathi had ever seen. She summoned Xyler and Vorlag to her bridge. It was a cavernous, dark space, lit only by the cold blue light of holographic displays. "The Zephyrian fleet is gathered," Rostova said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast chamber. "They expect a siege. They are preparing for a battle of honor at the heart of their empire. They will not get it." She gestured to the main display. It showed the Zephyr system, its star a brilliant yellow, its capital world a jewel of civilization. A single red line was drawn from the edge of the system, aimed not at the planet but directly at the star. "We have achieved victory," Rostova announced. "Now we will achieve peace, a permanent peace. We will ensure that no one from the Zephyrian Empire ever threatens anyone again." Vorlag stared at the line. "What is that? A new weapon?" "It is the logical conclusion of warfare," Rostova said. "It is called the stellar ignition device. It is not precisely a bomb. It is a kinetic impactor, a solid rod of superdense material, accelerated to 99.9% of the speed of light. Its purpose is not to explode. Its purpose is to deliver enough kinetic energy into the heart of their star to trigger a premature supernova." Xyler felt the air leave his body. He stumbled back, his mind refusing to process the words. "A supernova, you would destroy the entire system. The planet, the star, is the only foolproof deterrent," Rostova said calmly. "We will not occupy them, we will not subjugate them, we will erase them. Their ideology, their culture, their threat, all of it will be reduced to expanding plasma and hard radiation. There will be no survivors, there will be no resurgence, there will be only a lesson." "This is genocide," Xyler screamed, his diplomatic composure utterly shattered. "This is an abomination. This is the termination of a credible and existential threat," Rostova corrected him, her eyes like chips of ice. It is the final move in a game they started. You asked for our help to win a war. This is how we win, completely. Vorlag drew his ceremonial energy blade, its hum a shriek of rage. I will not allow this. The Korathi primacy will not be party to such a crime. Before he could take a step, he was frozen in place by two human soldiers who seemed to materialize from the shadows, their weapons trained on him. They hadn't been there a second before. Part in this is over, Commander, Thorn said, stepping forward. You were the key. We are the door you unlocked. Now please watch the end of your war. The human fleet engaged the Zephyrians. It was a masterful, brutal battle. The human ships, now fully upgraded with Korathi shield and energy weapon technology, tore through the enemy formations. But it was all a feint, a grand distraction. While the Zephyrians were locked in a desperate struggle for survival, a single, sleek black ship, the final word, slipped past the chaos, its engines burning with unimaginable power as it accelerated the impactor. The Korathi could only watch, prisoners on Restova's bridge, as the missile streaked toward the yellow sun. It was invisible to the naked eye, a ghost of pure velocity. Then it hit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Zephyrian sun seemed to flicker. It swelled, turning a furious, angry red. Prominences of fire larger than planets lashed out into space, swallowing the inner worlds. Zephyr Prime, the shining capital of a 10,000-year empire, vanished in a heartbeat, its atmosphere stripped away, its oceans boiled into space, its continents cracking and melting into slag. Then the star exploded. A wave of pure, unrestrained stellar fury erupted outwards, a silent, expanding sphere of annihilation. It vaporized the entire Zephyrian fleet. It vaporized the human ships that had been too slow to escape. It vaporized everything. Where a star system had been, there was now only a rapidly expanding, beautiful, terrible nebula, a funeral shroud for 1 billion souls. The war was over. The aftermath was a silence that deafened the galaxy. The news of the Zephyrian Empire's end did not spread as a story of a great victory, but as a horror story whispered in hushed, terrified tones. Data streams carried the final, horrifying images of the Zephyr system's death across the galactic networks. They showed not just the destruction of the enemy, but the collateral damage that radiated outwards. The supernova's gamma ray burst sterilized a dozen nearby systems, wiping out primitive life on 3 worlds and rendering a neutral trading outpost, the Marasi hub, a radioactive tomb. The nanite plague from Veridia II, carried on solar winds, had begun to infect a neighboring system, turning a fledgling colony world into gray dust. Humanity had not just won a war. They had salted the earth of an entire sector of the galaxy. Xyler returned to Cora Prime not as a savior, but as a leper. He had saved his people from subjugation, only to deliver them into a state of perpetual shame. The Korathi had their independence, but they had lost their soul. They were now known as the people who had unleashed the humans. General Ristova and Colonel Thorn returned to Earth as heroes, but it was a quiet, somber heroism. They had secured humanity's place in the galaxy, not as partners, but as the thing in the dark that even monsters were afraid of. They had achieved the absolute security Ristova had sought, but at the cost of their own humanity. An emergency session of the Galactic Council was called. It was the largest gathering of species in a millennium. Xyler was summoned to testify. He stood in the center of the vast amphitheater under the gaze of hundreds of alien races, and he told them everything. He spoke of his people's desperation, of the humans' cold logic, of their terrifying efficiency, and of the final, abominable act that ended the war. He did not ask for pity. He gave a warning. The debate was fierce. Some called for a holy war against the human monsters. Others, more pragmatic, argued that to attack humanity would be to invite their own annihilation. It was a representative of the Lumina, a species of pure energy that had existed since the dawn of the galaxy, who proposed the final solution. You cannot defeat a fire by throwing more fuel on it, the Lumina communicated, its voice a chorus of harmonious chimes. This, humanity, is a unique phenomenon. They are a species that has weaponized existential despair. They have turned the act of survival into an act of total domination. To fight them is to become them. To reason with them is to misunderstand their fundamental nature. They cannot be governed. They must be contained. So the treaty was drafted. It was not a declaration of war or a sanction. It was a quarantine. It was called the Human Exclusion Protocols. The treaty, signed by every major power in the galaxy, declared the Sol system and a 100 light-year radius around it to be a permanent exclusion zone. No ship was to enter. No communication was to be sent. All technological and cultural exchange was to cease immediately. Humanity was to be left utterly and completely alone, walled off from the galaxy they had so brutally saved and terrified. They were granted their victory, and in return were sentenced to exile. On Earth, General Eva Rostova stood in the command center of the UDC, watching as, one by one, the lights representing galactic trade routes and diplomatic channels went dark on the master star chart. The galaxy was closing its doors. "We won, General," a subordinate said, his voice uncertain. Rostova stared at the map, at the single, tiny point of light that was Sol, now surrounded by an infinite, enforced darkness. She thought of the dead star, the murdered worlds, the silent terror that now filled the space between stars whenever her species was mentioned. "Yes," she whispered to the silent room. "We won. And now we are alone." The silence that answered was not one of peace, but of a profound and terrible isolation. Humanity was finally safe, masters of their own destiny, surrounded by a galaxy that would never, ever ask for their help again.